What if the person accused of murder is actually the only innocent one in the room? What if an entire town, cops, investigators, witnesses all quietly decided on a story before the truth even had a chance? Today we're diving into one of the most explosive true crime cases in recent American history. A Boston police officer found dead in the snow. His girlfriend charged with murder. And a web of connections so tangled, the FBI had to step in just to investigate the investigators. This is the Karen Read case. And nothing about it is simple. Let's start with the people you need to know. John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer. After his sister died of cancer, John took full custody of her 2 kids, raising them as his own. By all accounts, he was a dedicated, caring guy. Karen Read, John's girlfriend of 2 years. She's an asset manager. Not a cop. Not part of this tight-knit law enforcement world. That matters a lot. Brian Albert, Boston cop, head of the fugitive unit, and owner of 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. He's not just any cop, he's a former Marine, a trained boxer, and the kind of guy his own best friend reportedly described as someone even the police chief was scared of. Nicole Albert, Brian's wife. And here's where it gets incestuous. Nicole is the sister of Jen McCabe, who is one of Karen's close friends, or at least, someone Karen trusted enough to call in a panic. Brian Higgins, federal LATF agent. Brian Albert's best friend. They drove 4 hours together from New York the night of the incident. And 2 weeks before John died, Higgins kissed Karen Read inside John's own house. Colin Albert, 17 years old at the time, son of Chris Albert, who runs the entire town as one of 5 Canton selectmen overseeing the police department. Colin is Brian Albert's nephew. And Colin keeps showing up in photos with mysteriously injured knuckles. And finally, Canton, Massachusetts itself. A small, tight town where everyone went to the same high school, everyone's kids play on the same baseball team, and every cop investigating this case somehow knows the Albert family personally. Everyone except Karen Read. January 28th into the 29th, 2022. A blizzard is coming. Everyone gathers at the waterfall bar. John, Karen, Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, Jen McCabe, and others. Karen, by multiple witness accounts and CCTV footage, completely ignores Brian Higgins the entire night. He texts her one word, "Well." She doesn't respond. From the bar, the group heads to 34 Fairview Road, Brian Albert's house, for Brian Jr.'s 23rd birthday party. Karen says they'd never been to this house before. She felt uneasy. She asked John to go inside and check if they were actually welcome. She stayed in the car. John walks toward the front door. And never comes back out. Karen waits. She calls John at 12:33. Then 12:34. 12:34 again. 12:35. 12:36. 12:37. All unanswered. His phone goes completely silent at 12:33 am. No more interactions, ever again. Frustrated and furious, she drags off, leaving angry voicemails calling John a pervert, a loser, threatening to leave his niece and nephew home alone. She doesn't actually do any of that. She goes back to John's house, falls asleep on the couch, and wakes up at 4 am. He's still not home. She calls Jen McCabe. Jen says something strange, he never came here. Karen then calls John's childhood best friend Carrie Roberts, and together in blizzard conditions they go searching. They end up back at 34 Fairview Road. Karen starts screaming, "I see him! I see him!" Kicks the door open, runs out into the snow. Under a mound of snow on the front lawn, they find John O'Keefe unconscious, dying. Paramedics arrive. Fire trucks. Police cruisers. And yet, Brian Albert and Nicole Albert, the homeowners, claim they slept through all of it. Every siren. Every light. Every second of it. Here's where the prosecution's story starts to fall apart. The medical examiner, Dr. Squirty Ballow, performs John's autopsy. Her findings are disturbing, but not in the way the prosecution hoped. John has a massive laceration on the back of his skull, blunt force trauma. Not a sharp object. Something like a bat, a barbell, a dumbbell, the edge of a table, or a fall onto concrete. He has bleeding under both eyelids, what doctors call recognize, which signals severe internal skull injury. He has cuts on his face consistent with being punched, a tongue laceration consistent with a punch to the jaw. Strange linear lacerations running up and down his arm like something with multiple points dragged across it. Maybe a dog's claws. And here's what he does not have: broken legs. broken pelvis, fractured knees, shattered tibia, femur damage. Any of the injuries you would absolutely expect if a 210-pound man was struck by a reversing SUV at 24 miles per hour. The defense asks the medical examiner directly, are these injuries consistent with a car accident? Her answer: they are not the classic pedestrian injuries we observe, and the manner of death on his death certificate, not homicide, could not be determined. Even with all the information the state troopers fed her, including that Karen allegedly said Lai hit him, she still could not rule it a homicide. The defense argues the injuries look far more consistent with someone who was punched, fell backward, struck their head on a hard surface, and was then dragged outside to freeze. Now let's talk about the phones. When investigators want evidence in a murder case, they look at phones, text messages, call logs, location data. It's standard. Brian Albert, homeowner, Boston cop, gets rid of his phone. He claims he upgraded it. But the court order demanding he preserve that phone came on September 23, 2022. Brian Albert claims he upgraded his phone on September 22, one day before the order. He didn't tell prosecutors he'd already gotten rid of it. He just hung up the phone and never mentioned it. When pressed on this in court, he says he didn't understand the question. He's a 30-year veteran police detective who has testified in hundreds of trials. But Brian Higgins takes it further. Much further. He takes his phone, the SIM card broken in half, and throws it in the trash at a military base. Why a military base? Because military landfills have controlled access, require federal search warrants to enter, and essentially make it impossible for anyone to ever find what you threw away. This is a federal LATF agent who knows exactly what he's doing. Let's talk about what netizens and defense attorneys believe actually happened that night. The Albert house has a basement with a door that opens to the backyard. The backyard connects to the front lawn exactly where John's body was found, near the flagpole. Apple Health data from John's phone shows 36 steps taken at 12:30 and roughly 84 feet, consistent with walking from a car to the front door. It also shows going up and down stairs equivalent to 3 flights. Brian Higgins, when questioned by federal investigators, admitted he saw a tall, dark-haired male briefly enter the house that night. He says he was unsure who it was. But Brian Higgins knows exactly what John O'Keefe looks like. They watched a Patriots game together 2 weeks earlier. Now enter Chloe the Alberts, a 70-pound German Shepherd. The defense asks the medical examiner, could those strange linear lacerations on John's arm be from a German Shepherd's claws? Her answer, possibly, yes. But when investigators run DNA testing on John's shirt, no dog DNA. Only pig DNA. Nobody has ever explained the pig DNA. And Colin Albert, the 17-year-old. His name is never mentioned by a single partygoer in their original statements. Not once. It's only after Karen's team hires a private investigator and goes door to door that locals mention Colin was there. Then suddenly, every witness remembers, oh yeah, Colin was there, but he left at exactly 12:10 am. Everyone remembers the exact same time. Down to the minute. Yet in photos taken a few days after John's death, and again a month later, and again at a federal grand jury in 2023, Colin Albert's right hand knuckles keep appearing scraped, red, and injured. Always the right hand. Always with a different excuse. Here's what makes this case different from most murder cases. It's not just that there are suspicious people. It's that every single person investigating the case is connected to the suspects. Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert, Brian Albert's brother. Canton Selectman Chris Albert, Brian Albert's other brother, who oversees the entire police department. State Trooper Michael Proctor, whose wife is close friends with the Albert family and who searched Karen Reed's phone looking for, in his own texts, nudes. So far he omitted witness statements. He buried evidence, and his nickname on the internet became something unprintable. Brian Higgins has an office inside the Canton Police Department not because he works there, but because the chief of Canton Police, Kenneth Berkowitz, is his personal best friend. And in a toast at a party for the chief, Higgins reportedly said, "If you want to hide a body, Kenny Berkowitz is your man." The state troopers investigating John's death are connected to the Alberts through Julie Albert, Chris Albert's wife. They all went to high school together. Their kids play on the same teams. The FBI didn't just investigate John's death. They investigated the investigation itself. Because for separate law enforcement agencies, Boston PD, Canton PD, Massachusetts State Police, And federal agents are all somehow tangled in a web with the Albert family. And then it gets darker. Chris and Julie Albert own a pizza shop in Canton. Locals say the food is terrible and they have no idea how it stays in business. Before John O'Keefe died, he reportedly told his superiors that he was aware of drug activity in his neighborhood. His neighbor for many years was the Albert family. The day John died, he took his nephew to that same pizza shop for lunch. And the person who invited John O'Keefe to the Waterfall bar that night where everything started was Chris Albert. A man who didn't even have John's phone number until recently. A man whose family John was supposedly about to report. Defense attorneys believe John was lured to 34 Fairview to be murdered in a premeditated way. They believe a confrontation was planned, a message to be sent. A fight that went too far. And then a cover-up that involved half the town. Karen Reed faced 2 separate trials. The first ended in a mistrial. The second trial brought out even more shocking testimony: invisible jeeps that only certain witnesses could see, forged text message screenshots with suspicious extra commas, a Life 360 tracking app showing Alison McCabe got home at 1:32 am over an hour later than she claimed, and 2 men on CCTV footage at a bar throwing practice punches at each other an hour before John O'Keefe arrived at that house. Witness after witness couldn't remember basic facts: what time they left, whether they'd met the dog, whether they'd spoken to prosecutors, but every single one remembered Colin Albert left at exactly 12:10 am. And Brian Albert, when asked if he had any training in how criminals cover up crimes after 30 years as a detective, responded, "No. I've never gone to a training for criminals to cover up conduct."